more minute. I see that Donna McKnight is probably rounding up Bob.
He's getting a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Scott, thank you for joining us. Do our missions include Family Promise? Can they? How does anybody on the screen that looks familiar to you?
Unmute myself, sorry. Yeah, we support a lot of the organizations in Brevard County, and we have just established the budget for next year. So I'm going to session on Tuesday night for formal approval of that. So,
Great.
So we'll be addressing it then, Rick.
Okay. All right, let's start. I'll open us with prayer. Lord, you instruct us to take care of the least of these, yet we have often found your social instructions to be the most difficult to follow. Be with us today. Thank you for having everybody join us. And let us listen with our hearts as well as our ears and our head to see what is being said, to understand the need, and to pursue what you expect us to pursue for your kingdom here on earth. Amen. All right, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for the second in our Fred Talks. R is for Rooftops, and today we are going to be discussing various organizations, both faith-based and community organizations that deal with the homeless, the growing homeless issue, and what we've been calling housing insecurity. I'd like to start with Tara and Jane from Family Promise to give a brief overview of what their organization does and how they meet the growing need.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tara Pagliarini. I'm the Executive Director of Family Promise of Brevard. Our mission is to end family homelessness in Brevard by collaborating with our community to provide families with the support and resources that they need to put themselves on a path towards long-term housing stability. So we are addressing immediate and urgent needs, but we have our eye on the long game. Our goal is to not only prevent families from homelessness in the first place, but it's to, if they do become homeless, to walk that walk with them to ensure that they maintain housing stability for the long term. We don't want them to fall back into homelessness. And we work with several of the agencies here on the call. Brevard Homeless Coalition here is kind of the umbrella of homeless services for our county. And so we work closely with Housing for Homeless, with the Women's Center, with New Life Mission, with Children's Hunger Project, with so many really valuable community partners. We are not faith-based, we are actually secular, but we have a very strong relationship with our faith-based community through our emergency shelter program. So our first program is shelter, and it is done through congregations, places of worship throughout the county. And I say congregation because we have a temple, and we have churches that agree to host families in their places of worship, to volunteer their volunteers to spend the night with the families that we serve, to provide nutritious meals while our staff works closely to help them return back to housing. And because it's done through our congregations, we can prioritize groups that aren't able to be served in other locations, like fathers in a family, either single fathers or moms and dad with children, who we see as the growing number in our count of those who are homeless. And so we have those three programs of shelter, we have stabilization where we follow families for a year after shelter, and then we have homeless prevention, which you can imagine is the most happening program right now during the pandemic. It was bad before the pandemic, but now we've seen a 450% increase. So we've been in operation in the county for almost 8 years this year. And in that time served over 6,000 families.
All right. Thank you very much. Jane, you have anything you'd like to add to your?
No, there's nothing I could add to that. Great
Okay.
intro. I write the grants and do the outreach.
Oh,
for Tara.
wonderful. Wonderful. I was going to ask, and we will get around afterwards during the conversation about funding issues, how you guys get funded and from where and everything. Amber, let's jump to you, Brevard Homeless Coalition.
Yes.
What are you all about?
Yeah, so my name's Amber Carroll, and I am serving currently as the interim executive director. I assumed this role in the beginning of December, and I'm learning a lot. Tara did a great job of introducing what we do. We're serving as the lead agency for the continuum of care, which is basically we're responsible for managing the issues regarding homelessness in Brevard County. And so we are like an umbrella organization. We have a number of member organizations who are dedicated to eliminating homelessness. And so we manage the grant, the funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Florida Department of Children and Families. So yeah, that's kind of the work we do.
Great, thank you. Rob, talk about housing for homeless.
Yeah, Rob Cramp, I'm Executive Director of Housing for Homeless. We are not a faith-based agency, but church communities are some of our biggest donors in terms of in-kind donations. Our mission is to provide safe shelter, improve the quality of life, and promote recovery that helps veterans, families, and individuals to get back on their feet and move beyond homelessness. We've been around for 31 years. We have 93 properties, and at any one time house over 150 individuals and families, and that includes 50 or so veterans. We have 13 different programs funded by public and private funding. And we're very proud that our batting rate because what we do really is to help people stabilize their life until they're ready to move on into their own housing. And on average, 85% of the people within our programs are able to do just that, to get up back on their feet and move into their own housing.
Thank you. And Sierra, you're the outreach coordinator for Women's Center. What's the Women's Center attached to? And
yes, so we're the Women's Center of Brevard. So our mission is kind of one step away from housing. We do have housing programs. Our mission is to create safe, healthy, self-sufficient lives for victims of sexual violence and dating violence, and those suffering the ill effects of poverty, homelessness, and mental health challenges because of those issues. So we do have a transitional housing program. We have 12 two-bedroom units in that program. And then we have 2 emergency safe houses for victims fleeing a domestic situation.
all right, wonderful. And Scott, I'm going to ask you to talk about missions related, our Eastminster missions related to the housing insecurity issue.
Sure, I'd be glad to, Rick, thanks. And I want to welcome Barbara and Bob and Donna McKnight, who are also on our mission committee. They are my right and left hands here. They're the backbone of our mission committee, so I appreciate them showing up too. We have 4 missional points that we look at as a church. Food, water, housing, and educational material. As you can all appreciate, this past year has been devastating to everybody. And our big focus this past year has been really on food relief. We're working with an interfaith community, and through VOAD, we're serving over 350 families a week in terms of the needs, the growing needs because of the pandemic. And most of our efforts this year, as I said, has been on that. And we're working with a lot of the organizations on an interfaith basis to make sure that people are getting 3 meals a day, but primarily making sure that they've got some stability in their lives. As we know, this pandemic is here for a while, and our goal is to continue to support that. But we're also very active in the homelessness community. This past Christmas, we raised money homeless shelters, and also to provide what we call the great joy of Christmas, so that families could have gifts to share with their loved ones. So, you know, we really touch the community in many ways. We're a very caring and loving congregation that wants to basically share the love of Christ, and hopefully we're transforming lives one life at a time. And that's what our goal is.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I should add that Scott's when I first talked to Scott, 3 or 4 weeks ago about this talk and who on which mission should we absolutely include, naturally Habitat for Humanity came up. I contacted the local director, and she actually told me that she doesn't really think, I mean, that her organization is really the best one for this discussion, because they have, you know, to get a plan into the works and to start building and everything is, you know, many months in advance. And she said that they've been able to keep their projects going right through this. They haven't really seen an uptick in what they've been able to do, nor a downturn in what they've been able to do. So we did invite her to be here, and she said it really doesn't seem like this conversation would be the best place for Habitat for Humanity. We'll definitely get her back on, you know, because that's a big part of our mission outreach and everything. So,
hey Rick, if I might, I'd like Barbara Allen to just comment too.
Oh.
She's been actively involved with the homeless in the community. So Barbara, you want to make a comment too on things we're involved with? Can you unmute her?
I unmuted.
Okay, there.
The Daily Bread is one of the things that one of the organizations we support. They serve the homeless as well as those at risk for homelessness. And I believe they're working with the Homeless Coalition. We also work with CETA, provide them with food. It's mainly food with those organizations. Community for Hope, that's another one that provides housing. And I believe, you know, you're all working together. So I can't really add too much other than the homeless population is one that we try to support.
Well, let's start talking about some specifics. Sierra, what are you finding since the pandemic and this kind of downturn and isolation and everything? What are you finding in terms of an uptick? Are you finding an increased need for women and related to housing, temporary housing?
Yes, so I was actually excited when you contacted me just the day before. Earlier that day, I was in a meeting with our advocates, and they were expressing that they were having a lot of trouble with the victims that are coming to them for support. Their number one need is housing. And when they're not able to meet that fundamental need, those other needs of advocacy, therapy, you know, moving forward past their trauma isn't possible if they can't even have housing and get away from their abuser. Mm-hmm. So that's a real issue that we're facing is, you know, not having enough space in our emergency housing for everybody, or having, you know, the space for people to move into long term.
And is your organization finding that the loss of job is leading to loss of jobs, economic insecurity is leading to more frustration, leading to more domestic violence against women?
So I'm sure that's a part of it, because, you know, people are at home with their abuser, and then their abuser is most likely unemployed. That's why they're home as well. So we definitely experienced an uptick about 3 or 4 months after we went into lockdown. That's when the instability really started to happen, and we saw a huge increase in our numbers.
Mm-hmm. And Rob, what are you finding as far as veterans
for us, veterans have somewhat picked up more than civilians. I've been surprised. We already have 4 programs now for veterans, mostly in the Titusville area. And we're just in the process of adding another of our properties to this program because the demand is so high. The waiting list for individual veterans and families, but primarily individual homeless veterans, is definitely increasing. So yeah, we're seeing a real pickup in veterans. I think civilians as well. I mean, the response has been, I'll talk for a minute about funding. Mostly HUD, we get money two ways, directly from HUD and the VA, and then it comes through AMBER and the BHC, which is mostly state, apart from HUD is state funding, and through the emergency services grant. And we have at the moment received, and this comes under, I don't know if you're familiar with the government response in general in this area, comes under what they call the CARES Act. And the BHC has already received so far under this act over $500,000. And we're very excited at the moment because we're looking at potential maybe $4 million that may come through to the county through this program. So we're running around now trying to think, how do we spend it if we can get it?
Sure. And do organizations, all of your organizations, I'll throw this out there for all of you, when you provide housing, are you buying like an individual apartment block or a building? Or are you selectively purchasing townhomes that come available here and there? How does that work?
If I can continue for a minute on that, I think at the moment, Rick, in terms of the response to the current virus situation, that buying, purchasing, building, there is a point that Habitat for Humanity, I still think they're part of the conversation, by the way, but I think it's more of a longer term thing. What we have is a program, HUD-sponsored program and state-sponsored program called Rapid Rehousing. What we do there is we take funds through the BHC and we provide rental support from 1 to 3, maybe even 6 months to get people started. But they, in fact, sign a lease with a third-party landlord. So we don't have all the issues of obtaining property. It's already there. We just need to find a landlord that's willing to take our homeless applicant.
I can kind of piggyback on what Rob was saying, because we participate with the Rapid Rehousing. We don't have housing ourselves, but one of our strategic goals is to engage in creative solutions and partnerships to create more affordable housing. And we see one of those ways as doing a lot of landlord mitigation. And so to Rob's point, for families that might have a eviction history or felony history that make them not really desirable as a tenant, what we do is we wrap them in that year of case management with those rapid rehousing dollars, so that a family, as we present them to a landlord, we can help pay those first and last month's rent security deposits, and then guarantee that they'll have case management for a year that's focused on tenancy education, that landlord mitigation, financial coaching, connection to resources. And our goal really by that end of the year is home ownership. To Rob's point, I believe Habitat is a part of the conversation, because I think if there is a way to prioritize those formerly homeless, that might be good and prime for home ownership. I think any efforts that we could do to increase those opportunities are going to benefit our community at large. The other thing I wanted to say, the prior question about what we were seeing, and I had mentioned we had seen a 450% increase. To put it in perspective, and I think that many on this call know this, but prior to the pandemic, about 40% of our community had housing instability. Mm-hmm. And that includes those in poverty and those who meet the ALICE definition that asset limited, income constrained, but employed, who are living on a survival budget, that if any kind of disaster, anything happened for that family, that they would lose housing. And so, you know, and we also know that during the pandemic, 40% of low wage earners lost employment, whereas in comparison, only 9% of middle wage earners and high wage earners actually increased employment. So they were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And really, really scary to me is that when school started, 6,000 students were unaccounted for. And we know that a lot of those students were those living in transition, and we're still trying to track a lot of those students down with the Brevard public school system.
So, Jane, you're a grant writer. Where are you getting your money? I mean, who United Way?
We did receive some wonderful grants that were a combination of United Way, Community Foundation of Brevard, and the Space Coast Health Foundation. They banded together for special COVID funding this year, which was wonderful. And that really helped us supply prevention funds before the CARES money got here, because it took a while for the federal CARES money to get down to Brevard County. It just took a while to get there. So that was new funding for us in a big way. We do have a great relationship with Community Foundation for Brevard and some of those donors. We're also always applying for grants with local businesses such as L3 Harris. Anybody that's got a grant program, we're going to apply for it if their focus is on homelessness and prevention. We also have wonderful individual donors that really rose to the occasion this year when they heard how communities and families are struggling this year. So we have been very blessed in that regard. We do a couple fundraisers, and we're in the shirt for the 5K coming up, you know, a couple things like that for awareness and whatnot. Tara's going to show you our little poster.
Okay.
But that is a very fun family event, just mostly to raise awareness with people about the plight of families and what they're going through. Because as Tara said, these are generally working families. These are not families on perpetual welfare. They're out there, they're trying to work a minimum wage job or sometimes 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And it just took one event, which happened to be COVID, to take them over the edge. I think the problem was always there. It was just kind of underneath the surface. And then suddenly this event really magnified it and brought it to the forefront.
You know, I've said for years that the large majority of Americans, I mean, I won't add a percent number to it, but the large majority of Americans are only 2 words away from going from prosperous to, you know, broke, and that's you're fired.
Yep.
You know, and our lives, our financial lives and security hang on those 2 words. You're
Right.
hired and you're fired.
Right.
And it's, you know, Amber, do you see this as a long-term, anybody really? I mean, the numbers have spiked, of course. 450% is scary and very sobering. But this isn't going to be a short-term fix, is it? I mean, what are we looking at here in terms of ongoing reality?
I just wanted to say, based on our transitional housing program and what I've heard in that program is, like, we have, I believe it's a 97% success rate of moving people from our transitional housing program to permanent housing. And that's because it's a 2-year program where they're going through intense case management, working with a case manager, working on those skills for housing, employment, education, all of those things that lead to long-term permanent housing. And I think that's what we're missing, you know, with temporary housing versus transitional.
Rick,
Well,
you raised the point of, in your email to me anyway, a point of service companies, and many of our applicants and clients in our properties in the service companies in that country. And we know that most people working in first line service earn maximum $10 an hour. The fact is, in this county, no family earning less than $20,000 a year, which is around $10 an hour, can afford to rent anything without spending at least 50% of their income on housing. And HUD put out the data that 30% of the income is the maximum that people should be spending on housing for it to be affordable. So we have a major, even before this struck, we have around about 7,000 to 8,000 properties that we would need right now to deal with the homeless, and not only the homeless, but the low income situation.
And that's not going away. I mean, that, you know, meeting that need, I don't care how many people get vaccinated and how much it's coming back, the economy might come back. I've got to believe that we're talking about the residual effects of this for a couple of years.
Yeah, Rick, there's a real dichotomy going on right now with the demographics in Florida. We've got a housing boom going on because of Space Coast jobs being created. And there's a real residential property increase in the area, you know, in terms of housing costs. But we also have an inflood of people coming from New England and the Northeast, looking for warmer weather and tax breaks and whatnot. And that's really creating, I think, an extra burden on the homelessness here too. I just talked with my grandkids last night, and it's 45 below zero in Iowa, wind chill factor, and they're begging to come down here, and we're not going to have them move in with us. But there's a lot of people, you know, that are a lot worse off because of the cold weather and what's going on around the country. And I think you're going to see a bigger flight to Florida, and the numbers are going to get greater because of the exodus from the New England area and Northeast into Florida. So we've got a big problem coming. It's not a tsunami, but it's going to be a fairly large tidal wave of people coming in.
I'd like to ask a question on kind of piggybacking on that point. First, let me just thank everybody here from the organizations, because I think you all are doing an awesome job, amazing job. So thank you. On that point about the amount of affordable housing, how much more can we do with the local, county and state and even federal programs to create that housing? Because it seems like we were just talking about buying houses or renting houses. I don't know how scalable that is. You know, if we all pool money, you know, and sort of underwrite that, but does Brevard County, does the local city or state or federal have or an engagement that we can do in order to create those units?
Let me tell you what the county, each city has its own programs, and some are doing better than others. Melbourne is probably leading the way in terms of, Palm Bay is catching up quickly. But the county has a 5-year strategic plan. And each year it develops, it looks out 1 year. And last year they republished it. They identified that there would be needed they did it in terms of beds, in terms of capacity. To meet the homeless need, there was a need at that point for 1,100 beds. They then said in their 5-year plan, they intend to provide increased capacity through building or supporting building to add 94 beds. That is 8% of the need. So that's what the county is doing. There's a great opportunity here.
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Karen.
Oh, yeah, right. So we just this past week have it been in a whirlwind. We've been simultaneously, you have to kind of attack it from both ends. So on one hand, we're advocating and trying to create affordable housing. On the other hand, we're trying to help increase post-secondary education and certification of our adults so that they have a better chance of weathering a pandemic, so that they have higher wage job. Remember, I said that middle wage, they were only impacted 9% by unemployment during the pandemic. We need to help get them into that middle wage bracket. And so we've been trying to do both. But this past week, we've been talking with developers. There are developers out there, and there are several housing developments happening right now utilizing low income housing tax credits through the Florida Housing Loan Corporation. And it's possible we Family Promise may not be able to make that come to fruition because we're small but mighty. But there are other entities out there. Heritage Park at Crane Creek is about to launch 108 units. I heard about the same thing occurring, and that's with Carrefour, and they're well known for quality housing that's supportive for those who have been formerly homeless. I hear that it's happening in Titusville as well. We, Family Promise, are trying to make that happen in Cocoa. I don't know when that is, but we are moving forward with trying to address the low percentage of adults who are achieving post-secondary education and certifications by bringing those kinds of classes into the heart of Cocoa, where they are easily accessed without transportation barriers, and that we can directly create a direct line into things like CNA, CPT classes, the adult education, and all of the solutions are not one agency or one person or one entity. It is all of us together and all of us on this call. I think as Brevard Homeless Coalition begins to grow and leverage larger relationships, that we will see an ability to have a much more coordinated response to what we're talking about today. And Amber's new, as she said, she's new to the job. So prior executive directors have really primed us to get here. I think that we are primed for moving forward to create a much more unified response. So there's so many agencies out there, and I hear that you're working with so many, and so many congregations kind of are working with so many. But imagine if we all brought it together, that if all of our silos were brought into just some amazing solution, it'd be pretty incredible. You can be the hands and feet of Jesus in such a massive way, by helping all of the services that are out there in so heartful ways, long term.
Yeah. I'll open this question up to everybody, but Sierra has the title for it. When you're doing your outreach, what are you finding is any difficulties, any walls, barriers that you're finding in terms of getting people to really understand the scope?
Well, homelessness is always have that problem when it either comes to funding or support. It's like somebody else's problem. I can't count the number of times I've stood up in front of a public organization and people very sympathetic, but it's almost like, to be blunt, it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
If you're left wing, it's the government's problem. If it's right wing, it's the church's problem. And I find personally, because of the high volume of veterans we have, I can get a much better response talking about veterans than I can about civilian homelessness.
Yeah, it's somebody else's problem until it isn't.
Right.
And that is, in my opening prayer, it's we're instructed to take care of people, but yet it's been right down through Christianity's history, it's been the toughest part of the challenge. You know, developing a personal relationship is nothing compared with God is nothing compared to developing a personal relationship with somebody who lives down the street. So Amber, what do you see going forward? Let's, you know, we got a few minutes left here. What do you see going forward? Give us some hope or give us some gloom and doom.
Oh, I think there's hope. I think the people on this call are incredible. The agencies that are doing the work, they're creative, out of the box thinkers, which is really important and needed at this time. One of the, I want to answer one of those questions you said about barriers. And I think Rob and I talked about this the other day, but the funding that we get, so $4 million is great. It's coming in from the government, and we'll have access to it maybe if we can spend the money. But they put these restrictions on it, and people need care. They need case management. They need people to walk with them and show them how to get out of it. And most of our funding is restricted on hiring staff.
Yeah.
And they're qualified, trained social workers who know how to care for people and get them through this. And so I would say that's one of the a need that we have, is to find ways and partners who will give money to these organizations to bring on staff so they can increase capacity in caring for people. So that's one of the issues that I see, that we just put such a low value. We think, oh, we need to provide services like paying for rent, which is absolutely, we need to help with those kind of pieces, but also the value of giving money for jobs. And human touch and that accountability is huge.
I was an executive director and in kind of the upper reaches of various nonprofits for 11 years of my career earlier. And I found that, you know, there's often money available, but it's not for the day-to-day, keep your lights on, hire somebody. People want to know that their money is going right to the bottom line of who are you helping. And some organizations, I was with an organization called Episcopal Community Services, doing very, very much like that Family Promise did. You know, we would have directed, we would, you know, take on families and put them in housing and, you know, open a case file on them and everything. And the ultimate goal was to get them off of a dependency situation into home ownership. But you know, that when you look at it on paper, sometimes the bang for the buck, I mean, there was $8,000 a year per family and this was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So when you try to explain the bang for the buck, it doesn't, well, you know, you want how much money, you know, per family, but the long range benefit is just an incredible, by getting that single family, you know, off of, social services and into self-sufficiency is an amazing long-range financial and social benefit. So we have a few minutes left here. Anybody want to say some wrap up? Let's pursue where your organizations go from here. What you need, as Amber just talked about, what you need and how do we get there?
I think Tara was on the right page with all coming together. I believe we are a part of the Brevard Homeless Coalition as well. I think my coworker Barbara, our housing case manager, attends those meetings. And I think that's just it, all coming together in one place so that we can move forward in a long-term solution together.
Mm-hmm. Is there going to be money? Has anybody been able to, any policy wonks on the screen here? Is there going to be much needed money in the new, stimulus package being promoted out of the Biden administration?
We have, and I don't mean we have an influx of money coming into the county, but you've heard that we have a possibility at the coalition of 4 million. That 18 million is coming into the county for help with rent and I don't know if it's utilities. I think it may just be rent and mortgage for those who have fallen behind. And these are tremendous opportunities. What we really need to look at is how do we help families manage through it and long-term, because you already talked about, it's not just this one time, this one financial assistance. It's not just that one. It really requires that navigation to continue to have someone work alongside. And so as families do get stimulus money coming in, at least for our organization, and I believe for Rob, I can't speak for Women's Center, I assume it's the same, but when there's these kind of interventions, we need to attach case management with it. And sometimes case management isn't, I don't mean sexy, but it's just what you described. Sometimes people don't want to fund it. They see it as salaries. We don't want to fund salaries. Well, we're talking about funding services. We need to fund the services that are going to help families navigate out of housing instability. So it is that combination of those financial interventions, affordable housing, but then in building up skills, but then teaching those that tenancy education that's going to help them move beyond asking again. Because if they just stay stuck, they're going to drain resources of the community. And the only part I was going to add is we do use a tool in our county called the SPDAT. It's the Service Provision Decision Assistance tool that lets us know how reliant a household or a person is on the resources and with the community. And I can speak for our agency that we want to see that score decrease while we administer a self-sufficiency rating scale. We want to see that self-sufficiency increase. So there has to be that cross-section where one is decreasing and the other is increasing. And there has to be that targeted effort to drive those efforts. It has to be done with purpose.
I would think that some of that decrease and increase, some of that is going to happen, I hope, as restaurants reopen, the service industry starts to reopen. Unfortunately, even in full employment, you got a lot of working poor. People that are working, 50 hours a week, and they're only averaging $10 or $12 an hour. So even getting that into that industry back and those jobs back, I hope this isn't something that we're unable to tackle and get a handle on. What do you need from churches? What more could churches do?
I think organizations like Daily Bread and South Brevard Sharing Center, Central Brevard Sharing Center are where you can you can focus on in not only providing financial assistance, but support in terms of clothing and I think like that. I mean, we get a lot, probably more than we need, but these sharing centers and Daily Bread are much more in contact on a day-to-day basis with people who need help now. Yes, they need housing, but right now they need help, they need food, they need clothing, they need support for their children. And I think those are the organizations. With all the properties we have, we can't really say to, occasionally we use volunteers, maybe repaint a house. Yeah. That doesn't solve the immediate problem. People just want a house painted or not. But I think certainly the sharing centers and Daily Bread look to a lot from the churches in terms of contribution.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we try to partner with the sharing center. So if we have a church contact us and say, hey, we have these clothes or this furniture, we'll say, please send it to the sharing centers. And then when we have a family moving into housing, we work with the sharing center to get we have an MOU in place and send them with a voucher. So they get those items for free because they're working with us towards rehousing. For Family Promise, our core program is our shelter program. And so we're always looking for churches and other congregations who want to partner to provide emergency shelter and food. At the moment, we shut our shelter program down and we're sheltering in hotels, but we're still involving our congregations to provide meals to families every day because they don't have the ability to have a home cooked meal. And that's so important. Nutrition is so important to their health and wellness. And so each week, even though the shelter is shut down, congregations sign up for a week at a time, and they're delivering meals out to the one hotel that we're contracting with, which is in Melbourne. So every night they're getting a home cooked meal, which I say is like a hug. It's like a warm hug that somebody cares. And that's happening every single night. And then when we do reopen shelter, we need, some of the congregations may not be in a place to continue sheltering depending on their base of support. So we may need more host congregations, more support congregations as we move forward. And certainly as we look to think outside the box at big projects to bring the community together, any support you can lend, we'll keep you posted on that and ways to help, and any project you can get behind, especially when political will is at stake. Rob knows a lot about this, is, if the will isn't there, it's very hard to push something through. And so when a congregation shows up in full support at a city council meeting, there's a lot more likelihood that that's going to go through.
Wonderful. Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, Rick, I would just suggest to everybody, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a web page for our missions, and the human interest element, the numbers are mind-boggling across all avenues. But we're going to start doing the human interest stories of individuals who have been impacted by the pandemic and letting them tell the stories. And we find that our congregation is more sympathetic to that and willing to give money and really support those missions if they see the people. We're right now, everything's virtual, so they can't see day to day what's going on in the real world. So we're really going to share some video testimonies to make sure that people are aware the need is great and it's personalized.
All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. This has been an outstanding conversation. Uplifting in a lot of ways, a lot more uplifting than I expected it to be, quite frankly. And that's due to your efforts. I know that, in the nonprofit world and in the social services world, you're dealing with real people, when in the policy world, they're dealing with numbers. And like Scott just said, if we can put faces to the numbers, it really helps. I promise you, you will each hear from me again throughout the